Welcome back to The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering real, actionable insights you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees. This is my co host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. Dr. Ryman, why are we here?
Well, we're here every week because it can be so difficult to find good science-backed information about cannabis on the internet. Not only do most social media sites censor and block cannabis content, including educational content, but you have thousands of people out there that think they are cannabis experts. You might Google a question that has very real health and safety implications, and you might get 100 different answers. Even more, some of those answers may completely contradict each other. So, how do you know what the truth? Well, that's where we come in. We are here to answer your most pressing questions about cannabis in about 20 minutes or less so you can get the information you need and get on with your day. You can think of us as your kick ass granddaughters or really cool aunties, the women in your life who will always tell you the truth.
Well, welcome back, plant powered friends. We brought a special guest with us today, if you haven't noticed, and we're diving into a question that's on a lot of minds. Like, what does it really take to get cannabis medicine approved by the FDA? Well, we had to bring in an expert. We're thrilled to welcome back Hunter Land, PhD, MS, a leading expert in cannabinoid science who's been on the front lines of this process from his pivotal work at GW Pharma, helping bring Epidiolex and Sativex to market, to his deep knowledge of novel cannabinoids and terpenes. Hunter knows exactly what it takes to navigate the rigorous world of clinical trials and regulatory approvals. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. So if you've ever wondered how cannabis makes its way from a promising plant to an FDA approved medicine, stick around because you're about to find out. All right, Hunter, let's welcome you back to the show. We really appreciate you taking time to answer some of these questions for us because, again, we don't have all the answers and we like to bring in experts like you to help us. So, it's a very broad question, but what is the process like getting cannabis medicine approved by the FDA?
No, well, first, thank you again for having me back on the show. I appreciate that and the kind introduction as well. I will say that it's quite an undertaking to get cannabis or any component of cannabis approved as a medicine. There are pathways that the FDA seemingly are more supportive of now than they had been historically. When I first joined GW Pharma, the first trial was in advanced cancer pain under optimized opioid therapy. So these were patients that were unlikely to survive. Most of them were terminal, and a lot of them were on 100 plus morphine equivalents a day. So quite high doses. And the FDA kind of basically said, if you're going to give cannabis to people, we want you to give it to people that are really, really sick. We don't want you to look at maybe something more benign, which is problematic, right? Because if patients are that sick and that in pain, to think that anything is going to be that effective over like super high doses of morphine is that's a difficult mountain to climb. And you couple that with, at the time, it being Schedule 1. So despite there being a FDA approved THC compound called Marinol, that's FDA approved as Schedule 3, if you're getting it from the plant, at this time it was Schedule 1. So each individual site had to have a Schedule 1 DEA registration. And they also oftentimes had to get a second registration from the State Board of Pharmacy. We were importing it from the UK, so it was very expensive and difficult to get it imported. And sometimes it took a year or 18 months to even get a site certified to run those studies. So fast forward to Epidiolex. So that's CBD. It's a CBD isolate. So no THC. But at the time, it wasn't well known. I mean, this was 2012, right? So it wasn't well known that CBD was non-intoxicating, and we essentially wanted to give it to children that already had cognitive impairment, and many were having hundreds of seizures a month. So the FDA, we made our case. We had our tox data, our toxicity data, our safety data, some animal information, good manufacturing controls, and said, this isn't to get kids high. This is to help their seizures. The DEA, they're not scientists. So basically it was a cannabis compound that we were giving to little kids with seizures. So if you can imagine the difficulty to get that done. And at one point, I remember going to the 10th floor of Beth Israel Hospital, and we were behind two or three locked doors. We had done background checks on everyone, and we had this 5 or 10,000 pound safe, something ridiculous. The DEA came in, and I mean, like legit DEA agents suited up, and it's like myself, the doctor, pharmacist, and they walk over and they look at the safe and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to bolt this to the floor." So it's like, who's going to steal a 10,000 pound safe from the 10th floor of a hospital with CBD in it? And you fast forward, 2 or 3 years later, and you start seeing it in gas stations. So that was the most ambiguous part, to start the trials. Getting acceptance that it's a medicine was also quite difficult. And this was for CBD isolate, so no THC in this product. The FDA does have a process for botanical drugs. So although CBD comes from a plant, Epidiolex comes from a plant, because it's so highly purified, the FDA, they don't really care where it comes from. It's based on purity. Now, there are other things like Sativex or any plant extract that could be an approved drug if it's standardized, meaning that it's the same thing. It could be a ginger extract, or it could be there's a extract from some sort of cactus from Central America that's actually FDA approved. As long as it's standardized, you can go through this pathway called the Botanical Drug Guidance. And to follow that pathway, you have to have really rigorous, consistent controls, all these audit trails, and the FDA has to come in to inspect, and then you're allowed to run the trials. So even to get through the trials, there's a whole host of things that have to be done to even run those trials. So it's not an easy undertaking. We'll say that, especially from the manufacturing and regulatory construct to follow.
So you mentioned Schedule 1.
Hmm.
And of course, part of Schedule 1 is that there's no accepted medical value to this product.
Hmm.
Um, so I understand with Epidiolex, CBD is not Schedule 1, but THC is Schedule 1. So when you're
Hmm.
talking about Sativex, if you are trying to get approval to run FDA trials on a compound that by definition has no medical acceptance, how does that work? Are they basically saying, well, it has no medical acceptance, but I mean, the fact that it's still Schedule 1, even though there is an FDA approved THC medication from the natural plant, seems to be in conflict. So, can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Well, I mean, you're correct in the scheduling, right? Because THC is actually Schedule 3, dronabinol is a Schedule 3 product. And then there's a liquid one, Sandros, that's Schedule 2. And those are the highest level, meaning that there's a highest, especially Schedule 2, high risk of abuse, same as opioids. Now, we could argue the comparator of THC and opioids. I think there's a strong argument to say it's not in the same, shouldn't be in the same schedule. Uh, However, what we don't know, and we talk about these combinations of a plant extract, there are many different compounds in cannabis. So there could be THCP, for example, which is known to be a more potent agonist than just delta 9 THC. There could be these other cannabinoids that they're not familiar with. So from the FDA, the agency standpoint, okay, there's THC, but what about this other stuff? How does it compare? Is this more intoxicating than what's approved or not? Is it more addictive? So they don't know until you give them the data. They're saying, well, we know what this is. It's THC. We know how this acts. We've done abuse liability studies. We see what it is. We don't know about your plant extract that has all this other stuff in it. So until you give them the data to reschedule, it will maintain Schedule 1. Now, there is a big effort right now to reduce cannabis from Schedule 1 to maybe Schedule 3. Now, that doesn't actually do anything for most individuals or the state level because, for instance, I think that benzodiazepines like Xanax are Schedule 3. I think ketamine can be Schedule 2. Even cocaine is Schedule 2. But even though that it's not Schedule 1, you can't go make it in your bathtub and go sell it. Like you still have to have a registration at that facility and that manufacturing to make that compound. So even if it's scheduled, what that will help is every single site every single doctor and hospital that we do research with, they won't be required to get a Schedule 1 license. They can use their own existing license. Most of them have Schedule 3 licenses. So you're not picking from just the pool of people that only do Schedule 1 work, which is often drugs of abuse. So a big risk. So it would certainly help research if it went to
Yeah.
Schedule 3.
Well, absolutely. I think it also would help acceptance when, doctors are looking to maybe recommend it to patients simply by redefining it as having medical value. Um,
100%.
and, having it be taught more widely in medical school, something where that has been a huge barrier to education and acceptance among the medical community is having a definition of having no accepted medical value. So I agree, but I also know it's not the same thing as changing the legal status. So it's not going to change anything around what the law currently says you can and cannot have, or what you need to have in order to sell the product. There's been a lot of talk that it would make all cannabis, like being sold in the dispensary down the street, have to be sold by a Schedule 3 licensed pharmacist. So I think one of the big questions is, how will the current legal system exist side by side with a pharmaceutical system that might be developing cannabis into FDA approved medications, but we still want people to have access to the raw plant at the local dispensary. What do you see as being ways that those two systems can coexist? Do you think they can coexist? Do you think it's better off to move everything into a pharmaceutical system? Or do you think that there is of therapeutic value or recreational value to having both of those six systems exist simultaneously?
Yeah, excellent question. I think as with other things, there's swim lanes, right? I mean, we see this in every area, and in many cases, it is in the best interest of patients to be in one swim lane versus the other. So, for general wellness and things that aren't critically unmet needs, so I give you the example of the pediatric patient that's having 100 seizures a month and is on 5 or 6 different medications where we need to check the blood levels of those medications, their liver enzymes, they need to go in for routine checks. And to get the amount of CBD, they may be taking 1,000 milligrams or 1,500 milligrams a day. That's basically like one bottle a day. So $100 a day out of pocket to treat your child. That's just not, I mean, it's expensive. It comes from a plant. That's just not a viable solution for most families to pay, $3,000 a month out of pocket, right? So I think in situations like that, it certainly makes sense to have something that's approved and proven that insurance companies will cover. And without having that established, even if you said, okay, it's fine, you can buy it without a prescription, then how are you going to pay for it? And it disproportionately affects individuals that, um, may not have the income to pay for it. So even if it's something like, a sleep medication, right? That where it costs $25 a day. Well, that's still a lot of money for somebody to pay every single day for their sleep medication if they could get something that works through prescription. Now, there are many other instances where you could say that patients can be treated at much lower doses and effectively for something just by going to the local dispensary and having something that's controlled, that's not overly promoted, that the use isn't misstated, maybe kind of more in the supplement things where we see, this supports structure function, right? So not curing a disease or treating epilepsy, but maybe supporting sleep or supporting normal daily function or reducing anxiety. Those are things that fall under structure function that aren't like a catastrophic disease. So I think, and we see this in other areas like acupuncture and things like this that may or may not get insurance reimbursement, but help a lot of people. So I think we can do all these things, right? Like I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and nor do I think they should be.
Yeah, I think that being able to develop medications that are reimbursed by insurance is a huge benefit to rescheduling cannabis, because I
Hmm.
know that there are patients out there right now that are paying out of pocket, a lot out of pocket to try to treat their conditions with products from the dispensary. And, a 10 milligram gummy when you need a very high dose to treat your condition isn't going to do it. You're eating
No.
like 20 gummies a day. We definitely don't want people to feel like they have to smoke in order to get what they need, and that's such a variable dosing anyway. So I do think that that's a huge benefit for people that are what we call true patients who are trying to treat a disease versus people that are looking for wellness. We did an episode a few weeks ago about cannabis and menopause. And there's lots of different types of menopause. There's menopause where there's discomfort, sleep disturbance, temperature disturbance, mood disturbance. And then there's menopause that rises to the level of a disorder where people are experiencing a lot of life disruption as a result that might require a different kind of treatment. So I do agree with you that it should not be mutually exclusive. I have another question, Christina, unless you have a question.
Well, can I just pause just real quick? Because two things I would like to say. First is I think that if there's an area in cannabis and with cannabinoids that's understudied, it is in women's health. And I am a strong supporter of anybody doing research in that area. I may not be the right person to do said research, but you certainly have my support. And I think that the preliminary data in those areas is really impressive. It may be even historical reference to using cannabis for women's health is pretty prevalent and research data. So, I think that's a very important thing. And you mentioned the CBD, like the 10 milligram gummies, something we ran into some in the clinical trials where patients said, oh, I already tried CBD, it didn't work, or I tried this before and it didn't work. Well, the one thing about having a approved drug is the dose to take and it's administered. So if you take 10 milligrams and it doesn't work, I mean, that's like taking a half of aspirin for your headache. You never even really gave it a chance. So I think without that, or the other side would be the acceptance, like, depending on where you are, I just don't see my grandma going to the dispensary and getting, some Bubba Kush with a vaporizer volcano. She may want to just, take her soft gel and go to sleep at night and not have as much pain and have her traditional doctor that manages all her other stuff do that. So without doing all of it, some people may love the volcano and the Bubba Kush, and that may be helpful for them. But then there's other people that are going to miss out on the therapeutic value of the plant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We looking at consumer research, current consumers, people that are right now consuming cannabis, smoking flower is still the prevalent way that people
Hmm.
prefer to consume. But when we talk to potential consumers, people that have never consumed but would consider it, usually because they say that their doctor recommended it or they get some kind of illness where cannabis might be helpful, 70% of them say that they would choose edibles if they were to try
Interesting.
cannabis. So I do think we are looking at a whole new kind of cohort of potential consumers that want to consider cannabis but are not turned on by the smoking aspect and are
Hmm.
looking for other modes of ingestion. And certainly having a properly dosed, soft gel prescribed by your doctor that you pick up at Walgreens is going to be a lot more palatable to them than
Hmm.
going to a dispensary and talking to a bud tender and being sold cannabis flower that they then have to smoke when they've never smoked anything in their lives.
Right.
So I do agree that there's definitely a need for a more traditional method of administering it. Um,
Yeah, I was going to
Okay.
add on to that. I'm glad we brought up the subject of rec versus, um, you know, pharmaceutically assisted dispensing because we had the cannabis queen from Australia on Melanie Winsell to talk about how Australia does things, and Australia just only has one system. So it was like really interesting to hear that they only do medical, and that's the only way to get it, and you cannot use it recreationally. And I think here, what's most important is like dosage, and that's what we hear a lot when people on the show, right? They don't know how to use the products. They are interested in it, but they don't know how to use it. So as we wrap up this episode in dosage, I was going to ask, what was your experience in dosage, but I don't know that we have time for that. So I wanted to end with what excites you the most about the future of cannabinoid based medicines.
Oh, well, that's great. Right now, I've got a lot of interest in how cannabinoids, whether it's CBD or other cannabinoids, could be used as an adjunct or an add-on to existing treatments to maybe make them safer and more efficacious. So we do see that in some cases with things like that cause inflammation, that you can get around some of the side effects by reducing one drug and adding CBD or maybe some other cannabinoids. And I think it's done in oncology with standard anti-cancer treatments. And I think this could be a nice way to see if we can make existing medications safer and then enhance the acceptance of cannabinoids through medical channels. So
Can you
that's
share some of the research that you're working on currently?
Sure. Love to. Right now, I'm working on reducing corticosteroids, like things like prednisone and cortisol and things like that, with use of CBD specifically. So we have some pretty interesting data in Crohn's where we've reduced steroids by 70% by including CBD. And if you take steroids, they're brilliant medications for treating disease and inflammation. Unfortunately, the side effect profile is not great. So if you can reduce them by 70%, we're just not seeing side effects, just not initially, and we're getting much better results of efficacy. So I think this is just the start. I think there's many areas that we could look into to enhance the therapeutic potentials of existing therapy while making them safer. I call it rational polypharmacy. So,
And reducing side effects of some of
yeah,
these nasty drugs or
yeah,
pharmaceuticals.
exactly. You improve the side effects, lower the dose, and maybe enhance the efficacy. So I think we can do good and do well on both sides.
All right. Well, I'll take us out. That's a wrap on today's deep dive into the world of FDA approved cannabis medicine. Big thanks again, Hunter Land, for giving us an insider's look on what it really takes to bring these plant powered remedies to market. Really appreciate your time donating 2 episodes to us. But we felt like these topics really needed an expert. So thank you again, Hunter. And you at home, if today's conversation sparked your curiosity, and we hope it did, make sure you catch part 1 of our chat where we broke down what CBD really is and how it works. And if you're new to this podcast, welcome. We love having you here. We've got a YouTube channel that's got tons more information. So you're welcome to go check us out on YouTube. We have a Garden of Wisdom. Subscribe, like, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And as of today, we are now on Apple Podcasts. So that's exciting. So if you like to listen to podcasts, you can get your dose there as well. Just find The Truth About the Plant on Apple Podcast. So until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep those questions blooming. All right.